Okay, so this is the first video of this farming season. I know I fell a little behind last year, there's a lot of work to be done, so I really wasn't keeping up with the videos. From here you can see a little bit, mainly weeds, a good portion of it being chickweed, but some of the Wando peas are starting to come up, which are these little guys here. And they're just a green pea that's supposed to be suited quite well to this area. This would be the aforementioned chickweed. It's a really good bit of greenery that you can pick and feed to young birds. They really like it, especially geese and ducks. They'll eat their weight in that stuff. Now, we do have some green beans starting to come up here. This would be the row of tender green, and then the double row of top crop, which these are both planted in the double row technique with the little water reservoir down the middle. I'm about to start putting out a little bit of fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, and there we have the dog. She just has no respect whatsoever for the rows and walks through them, but such happens. Now we do have a number of gaps here. Some are still coming up. The weather's been a little erratic, but all in all we've had pretty wonderful weather compared to this time last year when we were getting a lot of flooding. Now here we have a row of onions, and the way I did this, I took the same amount of space that a double row would occupy, and I actually left most of it flattened with just little ridges on either side to contain all of the water so that we wouldn't lose any irrigation. And then we just went 3 rows wide on the onions. Now we come to the potatoes, which they're doing quite well. And honestly, I do need to do a little bit of weeding, but these little guys have been up now for a couple of weeks, and they're growing really well. I prepped the soil with leaf litter. I hauled that in several months ago and just let it kind of decompose, tilled it in the soil, and then before I got ready to plant, I put out a whole lot of rabbit manure in all of this area because it's really high in phosphate, so it does really well with your subsoil vegetables. So anything like potatoes, turnips, carrots, any of those sort of things that produce a large root at the bottom, those are going to benefit quite a lot from the phosphate that is often found in high amounts in the rabbit manure as well as in horse manure. Now, something that I found out by accident last year, but that works really well, they're greened up really nice because the way in which I collect the rabbit manure, I have all of my cages on a concrete slab. So as it accumulates, it actually contains the urine as well, which contains a lot of nitrogen, and you don't lose that. If you've got your cages out on the ground, it'll just soak into the ground and you'll lose it. But in this case, I actually was able to capture that as well. And so you've got a lot of good phosphate and nitrogen. Potassium is not as important with these guys, partly, but not terribly important because they're not going to be sporting blooms. If this was something like, say, a pepper or tomato, or if it was flowers, anything flowering, then it would need more potassium. But with these guys, the primary things that they're going to be utilizing besides phosphate is going to be the nitrogen. Nitrogen to produce a nice large plant that will in turn create more tubers, and phosphate to help grow the nice sized tubers below the ground. Anyway, we've got about 5 or 6 different varieties in here all together, and to be quite honest, I was in such a hurry to plant them I didn't record each individual row. So several of these, this entire row here would be potatoes left over from last year. I kept back several because last year whenever I post the videos, everyone will see that it was a disaster. The flooding was so great that the entire potato crop was lost, with the exception of a few rows that I planted that came in very late. Those later rows were not producing tubers during the flooding, therefore They produced a smaller crop. I had to pick them early because the temperatures were such that the plants were beginning to die back. But they were late enough in the season that they weren't affected by all of the heavy rains. So in that respect, it was a blessing in disguise, because I was able to capture several types of potatoes that were pretty difficult to obtain. One of them was I believe it's either called a mountain rose or a rose mountain. It's a pinkish meated red potato that's high in antioxidants, as well as another one, the Purple Majesty, which is a large blue potato, and then the rest were just Pontiacs. And then everything else through here is a mixture of Pontiacs, which are a red potato, Kennebec, which is a white potato, and then some Yukon Golds. So we'll see how this whole stand does by the end of the year. If everything holds out the way it is now, with decent amount of rain but with no flooding and mild enough temperatures, I'm hoping to yield somewhere between 500 and 600 pounds off of this little group. And when we pick back up, we'll be taking a look at the rest of the garden.